Our next presenters are Bob Rose and Elston Johnson. Bob Rose is the Chief Meteorologist for the Lower Colorado River Authority, or LCRA. Bob is responsible for the daily forecast of weather conditions and temperature affecting LCRA's power, generation, electrical transmission, flood control, and water supply operations. In addition to short-term forecasts, Bob provides LCRA operations centers with long-term weather forecasts and updates on the threat for severe weather and extreme temperature. Bob earned his BS in meteorology from Texas A&M University. Prior to coming to LCRA, Bob worked at TV stations in Austin and Bryan College Station. Our other presenter, Elston Johnson, has 30 years of experience in the water industry. His experience includes drinking water and wastewater permitting, regulatory compliance, and water sector resilience. Mr. Johnson has worked with all sizes and types of water and wastewater utilities. He received a Bachelor's of Science degree in Bioenvironmental Sciences from Texas A&M University and a Master's of Science in Environmental Science from University of Texas at San Antonio. He spent 20 years with TCEQ and has been a consultant for the last 11 years. Please welcome Bob Rose and Elston Johnson.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we can expect in the weather for the rest of summer, looking out into the fall, maybe an early part of the winter. Just getting started, man, what a summer this has been from a weather perspective. It started off in June. We were pretty warm, weren't getting all that much rain, and we're thinking, this is going to be another one of those Texas summers. And we came into July, and whoa, everything changed. And thank you very much. And now we're moving into August, and it seems like now we are moving into that sort of Texas summer. So I'm going to talk about that here coming up in just a minute. But I did want to just reference really quick the flood event that we had about a month ago in the early part of July, and the phenomenal amounts of rain that we saw across the hill country and parts of central Texas. Now, I know you probably can't see the detail on these maps that well. There are some county lines that you could make out, but what is just phenomenal is how much rain fell in such a short period of time. And we were seeing amounts of, more than 20 inches in several locations. You can see on the right-hand side, these are some official totals that were recorded just over this 3-day period, where Bertram, just up to the northwest of Austin, you could see had over 20 inches, nearly 21 inches of rain in just 3-day period. And a lot of that coming in about 6 to 10 hour period of time. And go down the list, we're seeing anywhere between 6 and 20 inches of rain. Who would have thought in July we would see this kind of rain? July is typically one of the driest months of summer, so a very unfortunate event. But in Texas history, we have seen some really big rain events, and oftentimes this is how we break our long dry spells and droughts. These are some of the individual totals here across the Highland Lakes. Which is, for the agency that I look at, this is looking at the hill country. You can, again, see some of those 10-inch to 20-inch type totals, which were just phenomenal. And all of this water ran into either Lake Buchanan or Lake Travis. After we got out of that 4th of July weekend, the following weekend, we actually had more rain. You can see on this map here that the area purple that was spread across the hill country from very close to Kerr County, northwestward, all the way to just west of Waco. So we got another additional, 5-10 inches of rain over a lot of that same area. Very unusual. So having said that, just taking a look at the summer as a whole, when we look at the temperature departure from normal so far, looking back at June, it was a warm month all across the state. And that's why I was saying, it was shaping up to be another one of those very typical Texas summers. But then we got into July, and on the right-hand side, you can see how the temperature departures from normal were way below normal. When was the last time we had a July with below normal temperatures? All of the cloud cover, all of the rain for more than 2 weeks really helped to skew that temperature down. So now we're moving into August, and what's in store for us there. On the rainfall side, you can see that on June, it was an okay month. Many areas, especially East Texas, it was wetter than normal. Even West Texas was getting a lot of rain during that time. But as we moved into July, you notice the rainfall departure there, from normal there. The big story was out across the hill country, parts of West Texas. Interesting little story there is that parts of South Texas, the coastal plains, were actually drier than normal during that period of time. So it was mainly just the hill country in parts of central Texas that were above normal. So having all of that rain in July and the cooler than normal temperatures, this is the latest drought monitor for Texas. And really good news there, at least from a drought perspective. All of North Texas, the Panhandle, West Texas, and the majority of Central Texas is all now drought-free. Wow, we haven't seen that in quite a while. We still have lingering drought down around San Antonio and areas to the southwest, and the main reason on that is that the Edwards Aquifer didn't get a good recharge out of all the recent rains. Same thing here in Travis County in northern Hays County. The Barton Springs segment of the Edwards Aquifer just didn't get a lot of recovery from the July rain event. And areas out in far west Texas still in some stages of drought. We did get rid of the majority of the exceptional drought out that way. We have seen some very beneficial rain. So from a late July, early August perspective, this isn't bad. We haven't seen this kind of drought monitor in a long time. And so, looking at what's been causing our weather here throughout the year, a lot of it has to do with what goes on out in the Pacific. Many of you all have heard the terms El Nino, La Nina. Well, right now we're not in either one of those. We were in a weak La Nina earlier this year, and it ended back in early April. And ever since then, we're in what meteorologists call ENSO neutral. There are some meteorologists that like to say La Nada, but it's really ENSO neutral when you're not in either El Nino or La Nina. And we're seeing the sea surface temperatures there where the waters I have circled there. We're seeing a mixture of near normal to a little bit below normal on the sea surface temperatures, but really not enough to influence the atmosphere. So we're not seeing a big driver out of the Pacific right now. So our weather pattern kind of variable across a good part of the northern hemisphere. You probably heard news stories recently, about 2 weeks ago, oh man, a big heat wave up in the Northeast. And now it's been unusually cool for like the last week. We're seeing a lot of changes in the weather. A lot of rain in the southeast. We're not just seeing the weather pattern being stagnant at the current time. But what does that? How does that influence our weather? For our region, when the Pacific is in its neutral pattern, we really don't get a lot of influence out of the Pacific during the summer months. It's really more as we start moving into the fall and winter period. So having said that, what does the forecast look like for the Pacific? Because this really is a big driver in the behind-the-scenes look at our weather here. So the forecast, looking forward in time on this graph, the time is on the bottom. We start off with JJA, June, July, August, and we're looking all the way out into the early part of next year. And on the left-hand side is a probability scale. Will the Pacific be in either a La Nina, that's the blue bar, a El Nino, that would be the red bar, or the gray bar is the La Nada, if you will, where you're not in either one. And what we can see going in time, and this is based on a whole suite of computer forecast models, not just one, we can see as we go into late fall that the blue bar comes just a little bit above the gray bar. In other words, there is some thought that we may trend toward a weak La Nina later this fall, late fall, going into early winter. It probably won't be a really long-lasting La Nina, because if you look out toward the early part of next year, you see the gray bar is already more than 50%. So there are some indications that a weak La Nina may develop later this year. What does that mean for us? Well, the La Ninas tend to bring us a drier than normal pattern. And our thoughts are, as we start moving into the fall period and into winter, it looks like another drier than normal pattern. Now, of course, there's always going to be interruptions to that, maybe. But in the general scheme of things, it looks like we're headed toward a drier than normal pattern. So what are the forecast models saying? I'm kind of giving you the technical portion behind it. As we're in summer, one of the biggest drivers of our weather is that old heat dome. How many times have you all watched the TV news or seen the meteorologists up there and they show the big blue H sitting right on top of Texas? Like, oh my gosh, that's the kind of pattern that brings us little rain and boy, a lot of triple-digit temperatures. Well, here's the forecast for August, September, and October of where that darn blue H is going to be. And we're seeing really good consistency between both of our best performing forecast models, the European model on the left and the American CFS model, Climate Forecast System, on the right. Both are saying the big blue H is going to be just to our west over the parts of West Texas, northern Mexico, and the desert Southwest over this 3-month period. You know, it's not a great situation. At least it's not sitting directly on top of us. But with the high nearby, and again, this takes us all the way into October, that means we got a lot more warm weather coming our way. I don't see these below normal temperatures like we had in July. I think we're looking at a pretty warm August, September, and even stretching into October. And unfortunately, I think with the high this close by, not seeing a lot of rain coming our way over the next 3 months as well. And this will likely stretch into the winter period in addition to that. And as far as their temperatures go, now, this is a climate forecast system on the left, and I wish I could say, wow, I really believe this one. For some reason, the CFS, you see all that blue up there, and blue is on the scale on the bottom shows below normal temperatures. I don't think the model had a good run when it produced this. The European on the right is a little bit more believable, showing temperatures about 1 to maybe 2 degrees above normal here over the next 3 months. I have pretty good confidence in that. I don't know what the CFS was up to last week when it spit that out. As far as the rainfall goes, there is pretty good consistency here. On both models, you can see a lot of brown covering the majority of Texas. That brown, you can see the scale on the bottom, correlates with rainfall that is about 1 inch to maybe 2 inches below normal. So again, don't see a lot of rain coming our way unless we were to get some kind of tropical system headed into Texas that could change things. But then the overall weather pattern, things are just not looking very wet for us in the as late summer going into the fall. And this is what NOAA, the National Weather Service, is saying for our late summer, early fall pattern. Now, on the left-hand side is their temperature outlook, and I think we can all agree, it shows above normal temperatures from coast to coast, and Texas is right in the middle of that. On the rainfall side, they show equal chances. What can you do with equal chances? That means, the rainfall could be above normal, near normal, below normal. We're not really sure. They don't see enough trend. So take that as you may. It could go either direction. My thought is we're probably going to be a little bit drier than normal as we go through the late summer and going into fall. I touched on this a few minutes ago, that the hurricane season, it's still very much alive, and we're still going in the thick of things. The peak of the Atlantic hurricane season around September 10th, so we still have a long way to go. This could influence our weather as we go through the late summer and fall period. And to start off with just taking a look at the season, what is going on in the sea surface temperatures right now? This is a look at the Atlantic, the Caribbean, and the Gulf, and you see a lot of red, orange colors up there, scales on the right-hand side. See that sea surface temperatures much warmer than normal. In that little box that I have up there, that's called the main development region. As we get to this time of the year and going into September, this is where most of our storms tend to form. We get these waves that will roll off Africa, and within this box, this is where they tend to develop, and sometimes move toward Texas. Other times they'll move up to the north or affect another part of the country. In that boxed area, the sea surface temperatures are about the 12th warmest for this time of the year. So, that's some pretty good warm water. And you notice even into the Gulf, we have warm sea surface temperatures there as well. So if atmospheric conditions become just right, we definitely have the fuel there for storms to develop and take off. One thing that's also, though, been hindering many of the storms to develop is that Saharan dust. Now, this was an image from late last week, and everywhere where you see that yellow and red, this is where the satellite is picking up through a certain spectrum. They can pick up where the Saharan dust is. And Saharan dust tends to put a limit on tropical storm development. So as you might remember last week, we really didn't have anything going on because this dust was so plentiful. Over the weekend and into this part of the week, the dust now has started to go away, and we're starting to see storm activity over Africa wind down, and I don't think we're going to be seeing as much dust here over the next few weeks. And so conditions are going to become more favorable for tropical storm development as we move through the rest of August and definitely into September. Now, this was NOAA's outlook for the season. They produced this back in May, so a lot of things have changed since then. We've gotten more updates on sea surface temperatures and the summer pattern, but they were saying, pretty active season, 13 to 19 named storms, long-term average is 14. So, and this is still their current forecast. They will update this here about the third week of August, so we'll get an update from them and see, but they're saying it's going to be an active season. Even though we've only we're up to the D storm, Dexter right now, we still have a long way to go. We might still see 13 to 19 named storms. Now, this is from Colorado State University. Dr. Phil Klotzbach He updates his forecast every month, and so this came out the very first part of July. His August update isn't quite out yet, but he brought his numbers down just a little bit, now saying 16 named storms. Again, the long-term average is 14, so it's still slightly above normal. And at this time, we'd already had 3 storms, and he was expecting then 13 additional storms. 13 additional, that's a lot of storms. So still, that could be, it could do a lot of damage, potentially. So 16 named storms, 8 hurricanes, 3 major hurricanes. That's a pretty good hurricane forecast. Now, whether they come to Texas, nobody can really say. But there's nothing right now in the weather pattern that say it wouldn't. And if you remember back to a couple of those slides I showed you just a few minutes ago where the big blue H was just to our west, that's somewhat of a favorable pattern for those storms to be pulled inland, either toward Mexico or toward the western Gulf. So we're definitely going to have to keep our eyes on the tropical Atlantic, the Caribbean, and the Gulf here over the next few weeks. So putting everything together, this is kind of a summary of everything I've told you about without the pretty slides. Barring a tropical system, I don't see a lot of rain coming our way here through August, September, and October. And no signal for really heavy rains coming our way. Temperatures warmer than normal. August is going to be, another August. On the good side, I guess, I don't really see any real extreme temperatures. I do see triple digits coming our way, maybe 100, 102 in some areas of the state, but I don't see the 105s, 110s that we have seen maybe just 2 summers ago. If you remember in 23 and in 22, we had a lot of off-the-chart type temperatures. We're in ENSO neutral right now. There are some chances we could move toward a weak La Nina later into the fall, going into the early winter, but again, I don't think it's going to stick around for very long. We are looking at this active hurricane season, slightly above normal number of storms, and the activity should start picking up here really over the next week or two. We're already seeing that uptick here just the last couple of days, and I think this will continue as we go through August. So with that, that's the conclusion of my presentation, and we'll take questions, right? Okay, and up next will be Elston.
Talk about a little bit of preparation for severe weather. So thank you for this opportunity to give you a little discussion on that. What we want to talk about is Bob's actually pretty much covered our severe weather threats, so I'll throw up a few just general weather slides you get in these type of presentations. But then we're going to talk about the really important part, and that's assessing your infrastructure, determining what things you need to look at and what you need to do with some recommendations when you're preparing for extreme weather events. So he's talked about hurricanes. Yeah, we're just getting into our hurricane season. And from those, we get other things, tornadoes, straight line winds, flooding, all of that. The other thing that this time of year, as Bob also mentioned in Texas, is we deal with severe drought. And about 20% of the state is still in severe drought, as Bob mentioned. And so from there, we get wildfires, extreme heat, all those things that we need to prepare for. So some of the things we need to look at, some of the tools that are out there that we're already, with the water systems doing. And so, we talk about asset management plans. That's one way to really take a look at your facilities and see what's critical. The risk and resilience assessments, they are designed for you to prepare for all types of threats, including severe weather. So going through those assessments are very, very helpful. And then, of course, coming up with plans, implement plans for protecting your critical infrastructure. So we'll run through a few of those. The biggest thing I'll mention with any of these is you want to make sure you have a process and plan, people identified and responsible for getting these things done, and making sure you have a good, clear, defined timelines and due dates for these. Okay, so asset management planning. So we think about asset management planning, kind of think it to be for overall looking at your system, keeping up with, the condition of your critical or all your assets in general. And so you do an asset inventory evaluation to do that. It's a really, really important thing to do to continue to be able to manage your assets and then budget the money part of it. You heard about the money that's going to potentially be invested in infrastructure in this state in the next few years. And so it's a good time to understand what you have and what needs to be replaced, what needs to be repaired, what condition it's in. So TCEQ has a really great guidance on that. Also wanted to plug the Texas Water Development Board's asset management program for small systems. Had the opportunity to work on a few of these projects, and it's really good because it allows for professional groups, engineering groups, operators, finance folks, to, through a program that the board funds, help small systems put together an asset management plan. So they can go through and look at what they have, how to manage it, how to keep up with it, how to budget for it, repairs, replacements, how to determine what's needed in the future. And so through this program, you get an opportunity to really get some really good help and get it funded by the state. And so I'm not sure if there's a presentation about that, but this is just a glimpse of the flyer and the website that they have on the Texas Water Development Board website. I know everybody's pretty familiar with these. I've been going through EPPs for a few years, but it's a really good tool for getting prepared for a severe weather event. Now, it's focused on alternate power and providing service, maintaining service to your customers when you lose retail power service. But it has really good parts in it. It makes you identify what's critical, what needs to be power in your water system. Makes you put together a whole contact list of emergency contacts from, emergency services type people to, your service providers, gas, fuel, that kind of thing. And so it's a really good plan. The other good tool that's out there is the risk and resilience assessments. They're required through the American Water Infrastructure Act in 2018, or called AWIA. And so back in 2021, this came into effect, and a lot of community water systems went through this process initially. And so what you have to do is you have to conduct a risk and resilience assessment. And you have to look at, really focus on what's critical in your water system and what you need to do to address any threats that can impact your ability to provide service to your customers. And so that's required of all community water systems that serve more than 3,300 people. And from that, then you have to develop an emergency response plan. And so, again, in that plan, it's for all kinds of threats, but it does include preparing for severe weather. And then a little bit different is it's directly implemented by EPA, so you don't send it to TCEQ, you have to certify directly EPA that you've done this. And I mention this because that first round was done in the 2021 timeframe, but now one part of that is you have to do a recertification. You have to reevaluate what you did 5 years ago, take a look at how your system has changed, any updates you made, any new assets that you may have, new equipment, new sources, things like that. And now you have to go through and reevaluate that, redo your assessment, update your assessment, and do the certification. And so here I just have the deadlines based on population size. And so as you can see, the large systems have already gone through the assessment process and working on getting those emergency response plans knocked out by the end of September. And then the next round starts at the end of the year and goes through for emergency response plans to June of next year. And then the smaller systems have until next June to start working on the risk assessments and then develop an emergency response plan. And one thing that's unique is if you did not meet this threshold, if you served less than 3,300 people 5 years ago, now you have to do one if you've hit that threshold. And so these timeframes apply as well for smaller systems. And one good part of that process is that it requires you, WIA requires, when you're going through and developing your risk and resilience assessment, as well as your emergency response plans, that you need to work with your emergency management partners. And you're required to do that. And this is a good graphic. It's a little bit older, but it lines out in any kind of event, including severe weather, you could potentially work with all of these folks. Now, with the rise of automation, you would want to probably add in there the cybersecurity folks and people like the Cyber Command we heard about earlier this morning. And so, but you need to think about that, is that you need to make sure you get to know these people before the incident. You want to make sure that you have the phone numbers, you've built the relationships. If possible, maybe have done some exercises with them, just so that you know, so when the time comes and you're in the middle of all the madness of doing a response, you're not just now figuring out who your emergency management coordinator is or who the local health department person is. And so really encourage you to do that. And then there's a few other folks, like your mutual aid partners. And so TexWater, the Texas Water and Wastewater Agency Response Network, statewide mutual aid. It's been around for a while. Good program, free of charge, provides service of supplies, even personnel for response and incidents, and has a group of folks, a large group of utilities across the state that have signed on to help doing that. And again, it's free of charge to do that. And of course, you know, your electrical providers now with Senate Bill 3 and EPPs, you got to let them know what's critical in your facility. If you need to be listed as a critical facility that they need to be aware of. And of course, your critical service companies, portable generators, fuel pumps, parts. You need to make sure that you have all that information readily available for you and all your staff, so when that incident comes, that event happens, you know who to call. So critical infrastructure, source water, treatment plants, storage, you know, these are the things we think about. Chemical feed, piping, and even now with automation, monitoring equipment, financial systems. But I think the one key that we need to keep in mind is that your staff is probably your most critical. Because without them, a lot of this stuff, even with the increased automation, y'all know that, it won't run. And so we need to make sure that we put plans in place to take care of them as well. And so one of the things that happens when you have a long, extended incident response and recovery period is that, you know, personnel and staff fatigue is a huge thing. And so, you know, things that can happen with that is that, you know, you can be impaired, you know, with decision-making, communication, all things listed here. And so you want to make sure that you put things in place where you have scheduling and where your staff's not overworked, working extended hours, making sure that they're taken care of, them and their families, so that they can be productive during this really heightened time during these type of responses and recovery. So there are things called fatigue management plans. I know people in the safety world are very familiar with that, but that's something to really think about. If that's not part of your emergency response plan, that's something you need to look at. Additional things is think about is making sure that with some of those key employees, if there are hazardous conditions for traveling, you want to make sure that you have plans in place so they can get where they need to go to get either back home or back at work as you need them during those times. And of course, consider mutual aid to fill in any employee and personnel gaps that you may have. If you're really small or you have folks that can't get around, then you can go back to mutual aid, as I mentioned earlier, and we can help and provide staff for that. Now we're just going to kind of run through some recommendations. But yeah, we want to make sure that you're gathering your required resources. And so typically we think about, you know, we got to get our generators in place, we got to get a bunch of bottled water, we got to get first aid. Those are the things we think about, non-perishable food. But, you know, we are experiencing some issues with supply chain, you know, in these times. And so you want to think about keeping really spare parts or really critical equipment in place. And so this is a place we were out doing a risk assessment. I was really pleased to see that they had a brand new pump just sitting there, just waiting for one of them to break down, is to have it as just a backup and spare. And so it was a fairly small utility, so I was really, really pleased to see that. But as mentioned here, you know, make sure you have tools for repairs, make sure you're sampling equipment and as well as reagents, or you have enough on hand. So you can go for a month, maybe two, depending on how things are going. And of course, make sure you can communicate with those radios and having flashlights and batteries available. Facility and access. Make sure that you can get around. You know, if you live in an area that you typically have a lot of impacts to roads, if you get a lot of rain, or, you know, part of the state that may actually get frequent snow and ice, you want to make sure you can get around those four-wheel drives or ATVs. And if you have one of those electric gated systems, make sure you can open that gate without electricity on so you can get in and out, all right? And then just normal things, make sure you have the equipment or have access to the equipment to remove debris, clear branches, salt the roads, everything. Make sure you're in conjunction with your Department of Transportation. Make sure that you can get to your facilities so you can continue to serve your customers. All right, and then fuel. And so one of the things to think about, and I think, we all learned a lot from Uri a few years ago about making sure we take care of our generators and take care of the fueling generators here. And so this is just a shot of some fuel that was old, it's been sitting in a diesel tank of a generator for a while. And so this is what it can look like. And so you want to make sure that you're doing what you need to do for us, adding additives, utilizing your fuel, turning it over, developing refueling plans, all that kind of thing to make sure that you don't get this going, because it'll definitely impact. And then treatment chemicals. And so when you're in extreme weather and you may have especially events like hurricanes, tornadoes, high winds, you want to make sure that your chemicals are secure. And so this is a facility we're at. I was really pleased to see that they actually had this locked down to where it's pretty protected from flying debris, from getting knocked over and rolling away. And they really did a good job with that. But that's something you need to do, is definitely make sure that you protect your chemical facilities and protect your chemicals that are in place, especially the ones that are very hazardous and it can harm the public. Also, you can see here, make sure that all your chemical feeding equipment is set up for adverse weather. If it's cold, make sure you have a way to heat it without electricity. If you're using chemicals that may have very, very high temperature freezing points, make sure you take that into account. And storage tanks. I think everybody's pretty familiar with that, but you want to just make sure for cold weather, specifically, make sure things that are exposed are taken care of or covered. Make sure your level indicators and transducers are protected, any electrical controls you have. And of course, the normal things, top off storage tanks if you're gonna maybe have some power issues. Make sure that your pump cycles to maintain fresh water and prevent freezing. And our distribution system. Make sure your things that are exposed, like your sample stations, take some measures to protect it if you're in a cold weather area. But also this helps against vandalism as well, even though we're talking about extreme weather, but make sure we take those things because they are a conduit into your distribution system. Definitely look at making sure that any kind of exposed lines or anything are covered up, are insulated properly. And the big thing is inform your customers how they can protect their plumbing, especially in those freezing situations, as again, we learned during Uri. All right, when it comes to generation prep, you want to make sure that you're inspecting your wiring. When you're maintaining it, make sure you follow your manufacturer's recommended maintenance, checking batteries, stocking spare parts, and then make sure you lock it up. Again, want to make sure things aren't vandalized that can impact your system. And then with other electrical facilities that you have, you want to make sure that equipment is in working order, and develop plans for if you're using the uninterruptible power supplies or UPS, make sure you have a plan for recharging those UPSs if it's going to be an extended period of time. And then just general winterization, make sure you do have heat sources for anything that's exposed and alternate fuel sources for that. Just in case there is not electricity. Seal up those holes so you don't have any visitors like vermin, and keep the cool air, from getting in there and making impacts. And also anything that may have the potential to leak water out, make sure you can drain it properly. All right, and so I'm gonna run through a few little pictures. Now this one I totally stole, but it just, you can see this insulation job and you kind of see what the issue's with it. So not gonna be too effective when it starts raining. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I don't think this generator's gonna work very well, right? And they didn't do much asset management planning with this one. And so, but it was a facility we were at. They are definitely taking measures to take care of it. But I had just never seen one that looked like that and was still out operating. So definitely make sure you take care of that. And this was pretty unique to me. This is a Starlink satellite antenna. And so this was at a facility, and they wanted to protect it from potential hail. And so they got pretty ingenious and put the foam egg carton, cut it out, put a cover on it, and it made it through. Now, with all this, you would think I would take my own advice, right? So this is my car from the hailstorm we had in 2023. So I didn't do anything clearly to prepare, right? Yeah, but had I known if there is a foam poodle noodle hail prevention package available, I'd have done that, right? So just prevention, making sure you get prepared for things. So, and with that, that's it. So I think we can take questions now.
We got a question up here. Can EJ touch on the newer requirements of resiliency training for water operators? It came as a surprise during a renewal.
Okay, I'll attempt to. I know there's a licensing presentation later today, but there is a requirement for a renewal of a 2-hour resiliency course for operators. And so it's something that was put in place, I believe, during the last legislative session as a requirement. And so that is definitely a rule in place.
So our city, we started installing those sample stations, and I'm the lab tech guy, so I go out and collect the samples from the sample stations. And you said protect it. Any ideas besides wrapping the foam and maybe the tape around the pipe?
Oh, okay. So what I've seen out, besides using the foam and the pipe, is what I just showed. That was at a utility where they had, I assume they purchased them, these plastic covers, and they were insulated on the inside, but they were basically formed for the particular sampling station, and they had them all over the place, and they protected them from cold, again, from vandalism, anything like that. I'm not sure where they got them from. I didn't ask that, but that's something you might want to look into and see if those are out there, because this was about 4 or 5 years ago when I saw that.